So, Mr. Kurti, dear Albin, welcome to NATO headquarters. It's good to see you again. And I value this opportunity to meet with you. We have just addressed the recent tensions in the north of Kosovo and NATO's role to ensure all communities are safe and secure. I welcome that the situation on the ground has improved, but we must avoid any further escalation. So I urge all parties to act with restraint and avoid unhelpful rhetoric. Outstanding issues must be resolved through political dialogue. This was also my clear message to Serbian President Vučić earlier today. The NATO-led KFOR peacekeeping mission continues to monitor the situation closely. Our commander is in contact with both the Kosovo security organizations and the Serbian Chief of Defense. KFOR neutrality is central to its mission success, and KFOR is ready to intervene if stability is jeopardized. KFOR has more than 3,700 troops provided by 20 allies and 7 partners. We are fully committed to our mission and our mandate, UN Security Council Resolution 1244. KFOR will continue to provide a safe and secure environment and freedom of movement for all the people of Kosovo. But the only way towards sustainable peace is for Belgrade and Pristina to resolve their issues through the EU-facilitated dialogue. I urge all parties to engage positively and constructively in the latest round of the EU talks tomorrow. It is an opportunity for Kosovo to demonstrate that it is a responsible actor within the Euro-Atlantic community. So I really appreciate you being here today. It's great to have you back. It is important for NATO that Belgrade and Pristina resolve the differences through dialogue, to find common ground, and to reach a solution that respects the rights of all communities. So, dear Albin, great to see you back at the NATO headquarters. Welcome.
Dear Secretary General, dear journalists, ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad to be here jointly with the Honourable Mr. Stoltenberg, Secretary General of NATO, following our meeting in which I emphasized the intentions of our government and our country for the future. My government and I, as Prime Minister, are committed to ensuring that our policies are fully in line with shared Euro-Atlantic values. This is our determination, and it represents our political identity and our historical orientation. On this occasion, I want to express my highest gratitude to NATO. In the past 23 years, NATO has made an extraordinary contribution to freedom, the reconstruction of infrastructure destroyed during the war, and the security of our country and our citizens. The contribution of NATO to the establishment, development and professionalism of the Kosovo Security Force has been an exemplary success. Thanks to the close cooperation and coordination with KFOR, as well as to the professional advice given by the NATO Advisory and Liaison Team, Kosovo Security Force and its members have reached a high level of operational skills and capacities. All these are built and developed in accordance with NATO standards to be compatible and interoperable in joint missions and operations in the service of regional peace, security and stability and beyond. For this reason, we are very honored by the trust placed in the KSF to support NATO's humanitarian operation in the evacuation of Afghan citizens since August of last year. We are ready and committed to contribute to every NATO operation and project with all the capacities we have. We have a clear vision. We seek membership in NATO. This will enable us to give here and elsewhere what freedom and peace-loving democratic countries and nations gave and still give to our country and citizens. In this regard, membership in NATO's Partnership for Peace program is a stepping stone. Kosovo has demonstrated its commitment to protecting and promoting common principles and values, as well as its commitment to contributing to security and peace, not only in the region but also in the world. The threats, risks and challenges that NATO faces in the current security environment are felt by our country as well. Kosovo's institutions and citizens in the current situation have reason to be vigilant about destructive approach of our northern neighbor towards Kosovo and the region in general under Russia's detrimental agenda for Europe and the Balkans. We are fully committed to economic development, to welfare of our citizens, democracy, human and minority rights, security for all and safety for everyone, therefore to the rule of law and constitutionality. Dear Mr. Stoltenberg, the government of the Republic of Kosovo, as always, welcomes your support, but above all, your dedication to sustainable peace, security, and long-term stability in our region. We stand strong and together. Thank you.
Okay, we'll start with RTK Kosovo.
Tuhina RTK, Kosovo Public TV. Mr. Stoltenberg, you have emphasized several times that KFOR would intervene in case that stability is jeopardized. What needs to happen apart from barricades for KFOR to intervene, having in mind that Serbian military officials haven't excluded the fact that they would enter in Kosovo territory? And to Prime Minister Kurti, do you accept the qualification that both sides are held responsible for possible escalation? And if I may, the second question regarding the possibility to become member of PFP, are you aware of political obstacles that consensus is needed for accepting Kosovo in PFP, and we have 4 non-recognizers in NATO? Thank you.
First of what NATO can do, I think we have to start with the fact that NATO is in Kosovo with close to 4,000 troops. And that is currently our biggest military presence outside NATO territory. And that demonstrates a very strong commitment to peace, to stability, to the Western Balkans, to Kosovo, and also a very strong commitment by NATO allies, reiterated at the NATO summit in Madrid, that we will fulfill the UN mandate, which is the basis for our presence in Kosovo. So well-trained, well-equipped, well-led NATO forces from NATO allied countries and partners. Just the presence of these troops helps to de-escalate and prevent violence. Second, when needed, we have demonstrated again and again that we can deploy and increase our presence, for instance, in the north, as we have done over the last weeks. So we can do that again. We can further increase, and we also have, for instance, regular patrols of NATO KFOR troops. What NATO is able to do when needed and when necessary. Yeah, I think that's brief the answer.
Well, if one thinks of 2 sides, then on one side you have democratic state of Kosovo. We have professional police of our republic, and on the other hand, on the other side, you have illegal structures of Serbia who have been turned into criminal gangs, who erected barricades. 9 out of 13 of them were erected within 10 minutes. And in this sense, you can say that there are 2 sides, but we should never lose moral center. We should never abandon value-based policies, and that means that there should be zero tolerance towards crime and corruption, towards organized crime. From April last year until July this year, our police conducted altogether 39 operations, with which they managed to arrest dozens of criminals from the organized crime, which is multi-ethnic and multinational and cross-border, many of them being Albanian, not only Serbs. but our police does not distinguish criminals according to their national identity, only according to their acts and behavior as individuals or as groups. Therefore, we need all the support from EU, from NATO, from democratic West in general, for a democratic country of Kosovo. I know that there are 4 non-recognizers of our independence in NATO. I know it is not easy, but I always work hard and insist on what is just and needed.
Deutsche Welle.
Hi, thank you very much. Prime Minister Kurti, one of the ways that you've been helping NATO already is with the U.S. hosting Camp Leah for Afghan evacuees. I wanted to know if, since the 1 year that you gave the United States is up the end of August, have you agreed to extend the camp since there are evacuees who do not have who have not been given visas to go on to the United States? And will you accept these people to stay in Kosovo if they do not find third countries? And Mr. Secretary General, along those lines, is NATO doing anything to help the United States find homes for some of these former Afghan government officials, for example, who are not being granted visas to the U.S.? Is there something NATO can do to find them homes outside of America? Thank you very much.
First of all, it is our humanitarian duty to help refugees, people who had to flee due to hardships, due to catastrophes, due to coup d'etats, to regime change, and when their life and the lives of their family members are at risk. So it's a humanitarian duty. On the other hand, it is duty towards our allies and partners and friends. Of course, first of all, United States, to help when they are in need, and we will continue to do so. My Minister of Internal Affairs is in close cooperation with U.S. Embassy and with authorities, military authorities of the Camp Bondstill, in order to help all those people who are in need to the best of our abilities.
Well, also since the evacuation out of Kabul, thousands of people who have worked for NATO and NATO allies have been resettled in many different NATO countries, and I know there are still some remaining ones, and NATO allies are still addressing that together.
Bloomberg.
Thank you so much for the question. Natalia Droziak from Bloomberg. Prime Minister, I just wanted to ask, would you consider dropping your plans to switch license plates for the Serbs? And Secretary General, not related to this topic, on Ukraine, do you have any indication of who might be behind the blasts in Crimea that we saw yesterday and last week? Thank you.
We have made a decision on 29th of June this year to enable all Serbian citizens of Kosovo whose car plates are with denominations of year 1999, like legacy of the regime of Milosevic, produced in Serbia with acronyms of towns in Kosovo, to convert them into legal and legitimate car plates, RKS. To this end, we have started a campaign to inform all Serbian citizens, but also created certain financial incentives. So during this conversion of car plates, Serbian citizens will not have to pay excise and custom duty and value-added tax, which for one car goes up to 5,000 euros. We will continue with the campaign of information, and we will also implement this conversion of car plates. Moreover, Serbia itself agreed that since mid-January 2018, they are not going to produce such car plates in Serbia anymore, and they are also not going to force Serbs to use them. That's why 4 years after, we are implementing something which is, according to our constitution and law, legal, But on the other hand, also according to the Serbia's pledges in Brussels dialogue process, their obligation. Therefore, we do not see any way around it, and I think it's for the benefit of all of us to make everything legitimate and legal in our country.
On the explosions in Crimea, I cannot go into details about our intelligence, and I will not speculate. What I can say is that Crimea is illegally annexed by Russia. They illegally annexed Crimea in 2014. Ukraine has the right for self-defense. NATO allies are providing support to Ukraine. And of course, what we see now is that it is this senseless war which President Putin is responsible for, which is creating more and more damage, more and more suffering for the people of Ukraine. And one of the most acute dangers we all face is now the situation around the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia, where Russian troops have occupied and controlled the facility for several months, and they now use the ground around the nuclear power plant as a staging area, as a platform to launch artillery attacks on Ukrainian forces. And this is reckless, it is responsible, and it just underlines the importance of allowing international inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency, and also it demonstrates the importance that Russia should withdraw all its forces and not use a nuclear power plant and a ground around that power plant as a platform for launching military attacks against Ukraine.
Final question, Brussels Morning.
Thank you. Laila Mossadegh from Brussels Morning and Latitude. Secretary General, 1 year ago, exactly, I asked you and I begged you to ask your alliance to not recognize the Taliban. And now, in 1 year later, how do you see the situation in Afghanistan, and what is NATO position in a political and humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan? And the second one, as a strongest military organization in the world, like NATO, the alliance of NATO, they are trying to start negotiation with Taliban again. This is the time, I think, not start weak negotiation with the terrorist group like Taliban, because they still didn't cut their relation with Taliban, with Al-Qaeda, sorry. And how do you see this negotiation, and which is happened last year? It is really unforgettable for everyone, especially for the people of Afghanistan. Are you going to pressurize the Taliban to accept to cut their relation with Al-Qaeda and accept the women's rights in Afghanistan, and also give a little bit freedom for the people of Afghanistan, and also stop genocide in Afghanistan? Are you going to talk with the alliance to pressurize the Taliban? Thank you.
What we see now in Afghanistan is a tragedy for the Afghan people, and in particular for Afghan women. And the first anniversary of Taliban's takeover in Kabul is a bitter occasion where we demonstrate the brutality of the Taliban rule. And it's also, of course, bitter for all those who worked for so many years for a democratic, free Afghanistan, respecting human rights, including the rights of women. What NATO allies are doing is that they are stepping up their humanitarian support, the support for human rights groups, and of course also NATO allies and the international community is putting significant pressure on the Taliban regime, not least by imposing severe sanctions on the regime. Let me also add that we are, of course, we are aware of that. There have to be some severe lessons to be learned after all these years in Afghanistan. And I think the main, or perhaps most important lesson to be learned is that one thing is to fight terrorism, which was the main reason we went into Afghanistan. We have achieved a lot in the fight against terrorism. I also think that the latest strike against Al-Qaeda leader shows that we can continue to fight terrorism also from outside Afghanistan. But it is a much more ambitious task to move from fighting terrorism, which was the original purpose of the mission, to build a democratic, free Afghanistan. That was an ambition expressed by NATO allies, by the UN, by the European Union, and also by NATO. And that proved to be extremely much more difficult. So I think we achieved a lot in the fight against terrorism, but we have seen that in our efforts to create a more stable and free and democratic Afghanistan, what we have seen over the last year is actually a huge setback and a tragedy for Afghanistan, but also for all those allies and partners who worked so hard to create a more peaceful and democratic Afghanistan.
Thank you very much. This concludes this press conference.
Thank you.